This lesson is called Finding a Part of a Whole. We're on lesson 133, page 239 in your text, and we're going to do much of the page together. So, finding part of a whole is just a fraction, right? A fraction is part of a whole. So we are going to be expressing today's work in fraction form. So let's think of it this way, just as by way of introduction. If I have $5 and you have $10, then I can find what part I have compared to what part you have by expressing that as a fraction. And that would mean I'm going to put the lesser number over the greater number, 5 over 10, and then I'm going to reduce that, and that would be 1/2. So we could say that I have half as much money as you. Oops, make that an S, as you. So, in other words, $5 is half of $10. So if I'm expressing myself in complete thoughts, complete sentences, I can do that with math also. If you look at the text, the top of the page in the tan, they give you a rule. To find what part a lesser number is of a greater number, write the lesser number over the greater number to make a fraction. And if necessary, reduce the fraction to lowest terms. And they give you the example, 9 hours to 36 hours. They wrote the 9 over the 36, and that equals 1/4 when you reduce it. So we're going to start right in with 1A. Brian volunteered to help Mr. Jackson work in his garden over the summer. He worked a total of 27 hours. Mr. Jackson insisted on paying Brian for 9 of the hours. For what part of the time he worked was he paid? So I'm going to take the 9 hours over the 27 hours total. 9 hours paid over 27 hours total, and then I'm going to reduce that. So in other words, if I want to make that have a label, which I need to do because I'm working with a story problem, 1/3 of the time he worked was paid. So basically he did 14 hours of volunteer work and 9 hours of paid work. If that was 1A, let me write that down. Okay, so we're going to look now at B, 1B. Mr. Jackson had 48 rows in his garden. He planted peas in 6 of the rows. What part of the garden was planted in peas? Well, this is quite simple. We're going to take 6 rows of peas over 48 rows altogether, and we're going to reduce that to 1/8, and then I'm going to put a label, 1/8 of all the rows was peas. Okay, you're going to do 1C on your own. Looking at number 2, where it says to find the part of the whole, these are very straightforward. Let's start with 2A. And they say 12 inches is what part of 144 inches? So I take the smaller number and I put it over the larger number, and then I reduce to 1/12, and that one's done. Now I want you to look at that language. 12 inches means equals in math. What part, this is a blank, of, in math, of means times of 144 inches. So this looks like, if we are looking at it judiciously, an equation. So 12 is something times 144. Well, in algebra, I'm going to use a variable for that something, right? So this part is going to become a variable, And when I rewrite it, it's going to look like 144 x. Okay? So remember that times sign becomes my, let me just make it a different symbol because I don't want to use x and confuse that with a times sign. So let me erase that one, and I'm going to say it's y instead of x. Okay, so I'm saying 144 times something is 12. Well, look at that. 144 is a lot bigger than 12, right? So that means I'm multiplying by something that's going to cause 144 to get smaller. That's got to be a fraction. It's got to be less than 1, right? 144 times 1 is 144, and I have to get a lot smaller than that. So this is a very roundabout way, but it's going to make more sense when we get to number 3, where it says to compare. If I multiply, if I'm trying to solve an equation, then the way for me to solve it is to do an opposite operation. And remember, for me to do an opposite operation from times is to divide. So I'm going to divide by 144. I'm going to make that 144. Okay. Because I have to divide by the same thing on both sides, and I want y to be by itself, right? So now those are canceled out. They're gone. So that leaves me with just y over there. And then 12 over 144 should look very similar to that, what we began with, and that makes my answer 1/12. Now, let's take a look at what that'll look like in another example. So I'm going to skip to number 3. I changed my pen color. Let me try that on a different color. Yellow just doesn't show up as much. It's more like a highlighter. So look at 3A, and it says $20 is means equals blank times as much as $10. Oops, look at that. I have a hard time with these things. Okay, and what number times 10 gives me 20? 2. So you see how that understanding the language of algebra, I can insert certain symbols in my equation in order for me to write it like an equation, and that helps me to simplify my thoughts. So let's try B. I'm going to go back to blue because that shows up nicely on here. B says 5 inches is blank times as long as 1/2. So in other words, what times a half is going to give me 5? Well, the answer for that one would be 10. 10 times a half gives me 5. Let's go on to C. MMD. First thing I'm going to have to do is convert is blank times as large as D. Okay, so first of all, I want to convert. MMD is 2,000, 500, right? And D is 500. So if I put the rest of that in there, 2,500 is how much times 500? And my answer for that one would be 5. 5 times 500 gives me 2,500. So that 5 would also go up in my original equation. All right, let's look at D. D says 12 teaspoons is blank times as much as 2 tablespoons. Now here I'm going to have to do some conversions. I probably didn't leave myself enough room here. I'm going to write teaspoons in here so I remember what I was doing. Okay, how many teaspoons are in 1 tablespoon? Well, it takes 3 teaspoons to equal 1 tablespoon. I'm going to put a capital T there for tablespoon. So if it takes 3 teaspoons to make a tablespoon, then I can easily figure out that I'm dividing this one by 3. I'm dividing to make that 4, because that'd be 4 tablespoons, right? That tells me how many tablespoons, and then that's 4 is how much times 2. Well, that's just going to be 2. 2 times 2 is 4, right? So the first thing I had to do was make this conversion, and I can do that in my mind. I don't have to write it down. All right, we are on to 3E, and it says 1/4 inch means equals blank times as long as 1/8 inch. Now I don't have to do any conversions here. So what would I multiply times 1/8 to get 1/4? And I'm going to multiply by 2, because when I multiply those, the 2 would go over 1, and 2 times 1 is 2, and 1 times 8 is 8, and 2/8 is the same as 1/4. Okay? Most of these you should be able to figure out if you think about them. All right, we're going on to F, and we see 120 hectograms is equals blank times as heavy as 6 kilograms. Now here I'm going to have to do some conversions, because first of all I have to change hectograms to kilograms. How many hectograms are in a kilogram? Well, there are, I think it's 100, right? Nope, it's 10. Okay, so there's 10 hectograms in 1 kilogram. I had to do that whole little chart in my head and make that conversion. I couldn't just blurt that right out there. Okay, so if I have 120 hectograms and I'm converting that to be kilograms, so that means that would be the same thing as 12 kilograms, right? Now I can say what times 6 gives me 12, and the answer to that, 2. 2 times 6 equals 12. All right, we're on G. 24 quarts is how many times 6 quarts? And hopefully you're already seeing what your answer is going to be, because what times 6 equals 24? 4. 4 times 6 equals 24. So there's that answer to G. All right, H, $380 is, that's my equals, blank times as much as $38. Well, I should quickly be able to see that if I have 1 0, that's going to be 10. So 10 times 38 is 380. All right, I, 3 decades, and I'm going to put DEC period for my abbreviation, is equals blank times as long as 5 years. Well, first thing I have to do is remember that a decade is 10 years. So I'm going to convert this part to 30 years, right? Does everybody understand how I did that? There's 10 years in a decade, and I have 3 decades, so that's 3 sets of 10, 30 years. Now, what is going to be multiplied by 5 to get 30? And the answer there is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. Oh, I just don't have quite enough room to fit one more on here. Okay, 3J. And I have 25 weeks is blank times as long as 35 days. Okay, first thing I want to do is convert weeks to days because I'm trying to find an answer that's in days, right? So if there are 7 days in a week and I have 25 weeks, then I'm going to come and make a little problem here. 25 times 7. Okay, so that's 175 days. 35 or 25 weeks is 175 days. Now, if I'm trying to compare or figure out what times 35 is going to give me 175, in order for me to figure this one out, I'm going to have to do some division. So I'm going to set up a division problem, and I know I've shown you guys this before where I just invert it and put 35 in here, and that gives me a little bit of a better workspace. I'm trying to find out what I would multiply by 35 to get 175. So, all right, 5 times my 3 would give me the 15. Sorry, 5 times the 5. I got to multiply my ones place first. 5 times 5 is my 25. And I carry, and then 5 times my 3 is 15, plus 2 more is 17. So that's 175. So my answer here was 5. All right, now you should be able to solve the equations for number 4. You're going to finish number 4 and then go on to number 5 and do the pictograph. And I need a picture of the pictograph on number 5 for today's work that you turn in. Please let me know if you have a question about this.